Coaches, you've made a plan with your team, or leaders, you've made a plan with your organization. You think everybody's on board, but now you're starting to see one or two individuals are not following through on the plan. They said the right things at the beginning, but what do you do now that one or two people are resisting the behaviors, the actions that you think everybody's pre-agreed? That's episode 26 of the Don't Tell Me, Show Me podcast. So, guys, thanks for joining me again. I'll take you back to episode 10, if you can remember that. That was called Sticking to the Plan. That was really focused on how you get a whole team or an organization to come together and to follow through, to form a plan and follow through on it. But, Mark, you've had a couple of situations pop up this week where maybe the leader thought that plan was in place and agreed, but there's individual resistance. Can you, kick us off by outlining those problems, and then we'll invite Alan in to bounce off you from there.
Yeah, so this is more looking at individuals as opposed to a trend of people. So I have real world examples this week, and I know I've shared them with you guys. One Olympic sports team and one a corporate. So the Olympic sports team they've agreed a change of focus for each individual to start owning more within, their development. And an athlete has said to the coach, when the coach has said, what's yours? Where's your focus? The individual athlete said, I don't want to do that. So there's kind of an individual barrier there. And then, what does the coach do? The corporate element was they've agreed a level of communication of data that needs to be shared. And that's across the business. But now one of the senior managers is getting really tired because that manager is continuing to reach out for the information they need, and the other end is not providing it in the way that's fit for purpose. So now she's being drained. It's becoming a time pirate. The same for the coach, is thinking, well, what do I do now? So the challenge is that individual is now I'm getting a bit of a barrier within the team or the organization that's now a time pirate for me, causing me stress and energy, and I'm not sure what to do now.
Well, I've heard of energy vampires, and now I can add time pirates to my list. I like that. That's a good way of describing it. Alan, are you familiar with time pirates?
I am familiar with it, no. But that's new learning again, like you get on this podcast week on week. No, to answer your question, Simon. I'm hoping you've got another one I can contribute to.
All right, Mark's already derailed us with some great language. So, in your situation for you as a coach, you've agreed a plan, but you got one player who's resistant, maybe one player or athlete who doesn't want to progress with their individual work-ons. How have you addressed those kind of issues in the past on that individual level?
Well, I've tried to always take a step back and not make a judgment, first of all, that they're not honoring a commitment, and that then leads to me feeling frustrated and they're not doing the things they said they were going to do. I've tried to avoid, that's difficult, by the way. I've tried to avoid holding those feelings of frustration and having that filter. Generally, I've tried to approach it with a conversation to see if anything's changed in their life. So, for example, player commits to a training program that involves them. You can probably hear my dogs running around in the background, by the way. I feel like there's a party happening behind me that I'm trying to avoid.
No, don't worry, man. We got here. You got individual behavioral change at the dog.
Absolutely. Right now, we definitely have it in full flow. But I've tried to have conversations with them just to see if anything has changed in their schedule. So if they've agreed to a training schedule, that means they do, X amount of sessions per week on top of the team practices, and then they're not following through with that. Instead of getting frustrated and having difficult conversations that can be quite conflicting, I've tried to have conversations to see, is there anything that's changed in their life or their world that means they're not committing to these sessions? That's the first place I go. Second place I go to after you get that information is, right, do we need to change what the agreement is? If there's a genuine reason you can't fulfill this, then let's look at the agreement we had and let's modify that. And let's shape it to what you're able to do and what you're fully committed to do. If it's not that, this is where it gets really tricky and difficult. And Mark, you've supported me down through the years in this space. It's still to this day, I find it really difficult. If a player is not committing to the agreement that they made, or they're deciding they don't want to do it anymore, and it's not one of those logical, logistical reasons that their schedule has changed and their needs at home are increased or whatever it may be. How do you approach that? Can you speak on that, please? Because that's I think that's the real crux of this. That's the difficult part.
Yeah. So if we stick with the two examples to use as almost case studies, is the where they're similar is the first question I would always ask myself is, when the agreement's made, how engaged was that individual when we made the agreement? So an example may be, and I look at a sports one, you coaches spent a lot of time going, this is going to be a game changer for us. You then share it with a group of athletes. Worst case scenario, that athlete wasn't there. Next case scenario is they're sat at the back. The normal people are being vocal, but we haven't connected them in. So they haven't said no, but they haven't gone, yeah, I want to understand the value. I can't see how it fits with me. They're thinking this and they wander off. And now actually they didn't really agree to it. So then we're looking at, well, if that's the case, irrelevant, I need to be the detective and be inquisitive. So the example of an individual asking, I don't want to do that. And you're thinking, that's odd. So you may have had a little intervention in the coaching session the first time when you're asking, okay, so where's your focus? And they go, I don't really want to do that. It's very difficult then to, stop the session. It's not the right time. So you need to find time afterwards, have a one-to-one, and be the detective to be inquisitive, to understand, one, where's the barriers in it? What's your understanding of it? Because they may not even understand it. And where does that align or not align to you? What's preventing you from jumping all over this based on the value? So it may be, I'll give you an example, and I don't know if it's this athlete that I use as an example because I've never met this athlete. It may be the athlete has high expectations, results driven. So if they then say, this is my focus, they may think, well, actually, I don't believe I'm going to improve in that focus. And you're asking me to put energy into it in each session. And I'm outcome led. I want success quick. I have high expectations. And if I don't get it, that will feel like I've failed. So I prefer to avoid it. Even though the coach is looking and thinking, I'll make something up in kayaking, is the arm needs to be extended and pull through. So if you drop in the arm, that's cadence. That's going to affect impact time. But they're so focused on the time, they know if they do that, that's a skill acquisition change. They're probably going to slow down initially on the time, and they're really focused on the time. So they do it and they go, it's not working. It's uncomfortable. The boat's now moving left to right. I'm not straight. I want to go back. So it's easier for them to avoid. So that may be a reason. So for me, I would get down to their interpretation of it, where are the barriers, and then connect with, okay, so how would it impact you as an athlete? Let's look at the areas you want to improve in. Let's look at the data of where we are. Okay, where does this sit? Just to get some texture in there before we get into the disciplinary or why aren't you doing it? I need to be the inquisitive. And from that, often you'll find, especially once you know the athlete, if they're outcome driven or they don't like failure or they don't like discomfort, is I can now start understanding and maybe get them to see it in a different way, where we're not looking at expectations might be 3 months on this, but let's set some markers in practice that I can support you with, that you really see the value in committing to this element as an example. Anything from that first texture, Alan? Because I think it goes into what you naturally do. You seek to understand. You, even on previous episodes you shared, is it okay for me to share with you what I've seen or some observations? And they give you permission and you go, okay. But then it's the inquisitive, understanding your interpretation of it, the value, the barriers, the why.
Yeah, I completely can relate to that because, I think about a player from a technical standpoint. When they take basketball, for example, when a player who shoots a certain way and you as a coach feel like there's a more efficient way to shoot that ball, but it's going to mean there might be some regression to take place. It's you took me there because I've had that quite frequently. And what's worked for me in the past, because player will go back to the form that they used because they don't want to regress. They don't want to have that feeling of regression. It's understandable, of course. But just reminding players, to remind me, in fact, what the bigger picture is, to reconnect back to what their desired outcome is with the future of why you would make that change now. And then there's an aspect of helping them to understand a little bit around delayed gratification. Like, that's a concept I mention that quite a lot with players, and helping them to understand the concept of delayed gratification. And you, you used to say something years ago, it really landed with me quite strongly. It's not the pain of change now, it's like the pain of not achieving your goals later. Or you worded it really well, and maybe you can remind me what the exact wording was. But it was just trying to connect them to what will this look like 6 months from now if you don't commit to that change you want to make. It's just helping to position them. And it's also, Mark, there's an element of it's okay. It's all right that you've regressed. It's all right that you want to go back to that. But now let's reconnect to the purpose and why you wanted to make the change in the first place.
Yeah, needed to change. I think I bastardized. We can say that word because Alan swore on previous episodes. So I've got to pass. Is a quote from many years ago from somebody, I can't remember the name, but is if the pain of change is not greater than the pain of not achieving what you want to, then you're never going to change. It's that connection of balance to say, right, there will be a pain of change, but if I choose not to change, what's going to be the pain in 6 months and a year when I'm not achieving what I know I need to achieve, where my desire is? So there's going to be a discomfort now, but the greater discomfort I don't change is going to be worse. So I'm going to choose the pain now. And it's just that connection of the two when we work through.
What I find with myself and with other coaches, we expect as coaches to have these conversations once and it's done, it's fixed. And I think this is coaching. You talk about what is coaching. It's a consistency of support in whatever form that support needs to be, because we're talking about supporting somebody to reconnect to the choice, to the commitments they made in order to make some changes, whether it's behavioral change or it's all behavior change really at the end of the day. But that's coaching. It's not a one-off. Like, we've agreed, great, we understand the agreement, we've talked about what would the obstacles be with trying to fulfill this agreement, we've done all that. Then we're 6 months in, we're 3 months in, and they don't want to do it anymore. But coaching is having those conversations about delayed gratification, about what is this going to feel like in 6 months. And it's not the one conversation. I think coaches complain to me often, I've had that conversation. Good, have it again. Be better at having that conversation. Find a way to get through to that. Find a way to relight that fire. I don't care if you've had the conversation. Keep having it. You be better with the conversation. And the conversation being having the skill to bring them into the conversation where they're talking, they're sharing, and you get it all out on the table. Let's talk about the realities of why you want to stop this. Why do you want to quit the commitment? Let's get it all out on the table. And I think that's the really rich part, and arguably some will say the difficult part, but I think that's coaching, and maybe we give up on that too easy.
What's great is, Alan, you've connected to the previous episode that Simon and I connected with about keeping people connected in, not just doing it once. So it links into the last bit of having that one-to-one conversation. Once you get to a bit where there's common ground, where the person goes, oh yeah, I'm going to hate it, but I'm going to hate it more if I don't commit to this, because I'm not going to make the Olympic finals that I'm targeting to, because this is holding me back. So I now recognize I'm going to take this pain of change, not that pain of regret at the end. Okay, once we get to that agreement, we got to go, okay, so what would that look like? So specifics now, and then we get into that what if process. So now, who needs to know? And what if you don't commit to that in the next practice session, or in 2 weeks' time, 4 weeks' time? What permission are you giving me or the other athletes? What can we say to each other in those moments? Because I want to support you. So I hope we never have to, but it's tough change. So there's going to be dark days or tough days where you just, I'm just not going to. Let's agree that now. So this is where it goes back to what you're looking for, Alan, is you've just mentioned, is it's not just the regular discussions, it's the constant scanning of the people around within peers, whoever's supporting and coaching staff, say, I'm scanning for that agreement in actions, words, behaviors, whatever it is. As soon as it's not, I'm giving it time for either peers or self to re-establish it, see the change, and then I celebrate, or I've got to step in because I can't let it go. So where the challenge is, and you brought it up, Alan, is we as coaches have got to look for so much. And we mentioned it in one of the early episodes just about content of a session. You and Simon shared, right, you're looking at why I'm scanning for this. Who's leading on this? Who's checking behaviors? So when we have focus areas for individual sports, so rowing, kayaking, these types of sports where it's not a team, and even in the team, we've got to prime ourselves. So that's why I'm having a live Google Doc where the players are connecting to, these are my focus areas individual. Before a session, even if I'm driving in before I get out of the car, if I'm a more amateur coach, definitely a pro coach, I need to be having that on the board. I need to be opening that up before every session and go, right, who am I looking at now? And you might have a little ticks that 5 sessions in a row, these athletes have been great. They've been on it. So I'm not as focused on them for this session. These have had a few crosses. I'm going to scan for them. If I've got an assistant coach, can you scan for these 5? I'm going to scan for these 5. And we look for it consciously. That's how we keep it alive. But if the agreement's flawed, like you say, it's all from coach or the manager, and they're not really connecting to it. They're kind of nodding because they have to get out the room, but they're not owning it. And then we're not scanning for it consistently to help them and celebrate the change, but also check on the permission of honoring what we agree. If you said, I can do this, if you don't.
I think, Simon, I feel like can I just add a bit more to that before you go, Si? Is that okay? Just on the same theme as Mark's talking there. We're talking about reigniting someone's motivation because they stopped doing something because they lost the motivation for whatever reason, multiple reasons. So one way you could reignite them or reignite that motivation to honor their commitment and the thing they said they wanted to do is give them a bit of a relatability factor. So, Mark, I remember you did some work with me in a school in London years ago, and we worked with, pupils and students who were very disengaged with school, very disengaged with the rules of that school. And I watched you skillfully have a one-to-one with a young man, and you had conversations with him about stuff he was good at. And before you know it, he came alive telling you a story about how good he was at football and what his week was made up of for his commitment to football. And he gave you an hour by hour breakdown Monday to Sunday. And your response to him was, well, you proved that you have got, because he was saying, I just can't concentrate in school. I don't like it. I can't, it's hard to be here. I find it difficult. And you were trying to relate, well, you've proved that you've got abilities and capabilities and competencies in one space. You've got the skill set, you've got the tools. It's now understanding of how to use those tools in another space. So you were able to reignite, and for him, you could see a penny drop. I'm giving a very superficial, a surface level example of it here, because this went on for about an hour, 2 hours in a meeting, and we had multiple meetings with this young man. But you could see a light bulb moment go off with him going, oh, so I do have the skills to do that. I do have the tools to survive time in the school and in that classroom. Yeah, it's about applying yourself. You already have the capability. You're just not recognizing that and then applying it in another context. So I think that relatability factor and helping people to relate it to something that they're good at and that they have followed through and may reignite that motivation. Simon, I'll pass over to you.
Well, it's an interesting analogy between teaching, coaching, and leading in the workplace, because sometimes you're in a situation, especially teaching, I could imagine, where you've got enough life experience or experience in a particular domain that you can see past what the current capability of this player, this athlete, this person. You can see what they're capable of becoming. You can see what level that they can achieve, whereas they may not be able to see that themselves. So if their planning horizon is shorter than the coach, then it's understandable that they're just trying to get through this week at school. So they're just choosing behaviors which gets them through this week at school because of the environment they're in, or the athlete is choosing options, behaviors, choices that maximizes their performance this week because our culture is all about peaking for Saturday and it's all about performance this week. So it's hard for people in that context to lift their thinking up, look at a further planning horizon. So that can sometimes be the role of the coach, I wonder. We can see past that. But then also, is there an ethical component of that? Like, who am I to see further than you, the athlete or pupil? You know, who am I to sort of have a vision for you for the future? You've got to own that vision. So it's a little bit of I find that a kind of dilemma, a tricky situation.
I think part of that is understanding between management and leadership is, a leader can see the vision of a direction and often they can see the capability in others before they can. So part of that is to spot the behaviors or identify the behaviors that they are showing success, they're showing motivation, they're showing eagerness, they're showing commitment, and then raise their awareness to, well, you have the skills. So let's seek an opportunity where you can apply the skills you've already shown you have into this area. If you committed to that consistently long enough, what would that give you? So then they're connecting with, I haven't really thought about it that way before. But then set expectations. How long do you think it's going to take? And they might go 2 weeks. No, well, let's look eight weeks. This takes some time. But imagine if we did, the return we're going to get. So how can we work together? And I think that's when that's that process of great coaching is actually to see the potential in others sometimes before they can, but use a connection of what you've seen in the great stuff. Like somebody overweight is already motivated to find out the takeaways, and I'm generalizing here, I'm not disrespecting overweight people. If they go, look, I'm not motivated to train or not eat, but I'm really motivated to find where the takeaway is or find where food is. I'm always motivated to find food. So you're motivated. A kid is motivated to play on his game station, but not motivated to tidy his room. Motivated, but just where the direction is of the value and the need. And then I think the other texture, Simon, is to make sure once we make an agreement that we've spoken about, that's why I like those UAEs, the unacceptable, acceptable, and indeed exceptional, is we're then sharing a vision of what that looks and sounds like without invisible expectations. So we can have an agreement, yeah, I'm coming into that. But actually their interpretation of what that looks like could be very different. So if I put that into that business example, unless we've really agreed with that department or that other person of what's an example, what would be the timeline of you receiving these priority? And I'll only say priority if it is the agreed timeline that you can, within your job, give me that data. So they might go, I can do it within an hour. And then we're saying, what are the reasons why you might not be able to do that? Where's your restrictions? So they might go, I need to wait for data from this individual or this department or this contract before I can give that information. But in those moments, back to the what ifs, I'll let you know I haven't got that data still within our time frame. So I'm not ignoring you. You know where we go. So this is when we're putting texture of detail into the agreement. We've got an agreement, fine, but what does that look like? And what could prevent it? And then we've got those permissions of, okay, so if we don't, what are we going to agree with each other? And then scanning and honoring it, not let the puppy poo on a carpet, not let it slip for a couple. They must have been busy. No, we've got an agreement. So be inquisitive. Can you just remind me what we agreed or what's preventing you on this? And this is, you've noticed I do it sometimes with you guys. We've talked about covert recall, right? Where we wait back and we check. So overt recall is when early on, I'm thinking I might just initiate thought or stimulus. So that would be early on. We just go early on in the day if we've got a meeting or we need some data. All good today. I'm going to send you that email over at 12. You ready for that? Everything good. So all I'm doing is I'm not being patronizing, but I'm priming them. They go, yeah, good. So now because they might be busy, they might go, I need to get that information. So now they're going to be proactive in getting it. I think you've seen me sometimes with podcasts go, we're all right for this time. It's just, it's a way, if you guys are crazy busy, I know you are, it's just sometimes thinking, yeah, I'll just open up the laptop. It's just those little, and that's why I call those overt checks. It's just, I'm making judgment of this could help our success. I don't want to rely on it, but I've noticed sometimes there's a bit of regression. Could this help stimulate success for us?
Right. We're into the rapid fire round. So our theme here is preventing or overcoming individual resistance. So quick ideas, questions you could ask, tips for coaches listening here. How do we get started with this theme? Mark, do you want to kick us off?
Make sure the people of influence that are going to be actioning whatever the agreement is in the room, as is engaged, and you're seeking to understand their interpretation of whatever that agreement is.
Alan?
Check in on this agreement that's been made weekly. Get them to remind you week to week what they agreed to do, and it's a walk onto the practice court if it's a sports environment, or the pitch, conversation. It's not a meeting. Just keep it alive.
Help people recognize resistance by giving them permission to renegotiate a commitment. So give them two options. We either follow through on that commitment that we've agreed, or in advance, you come to me and say, you can't do it, or you're experiencing a problem and we need to renegotiate. So give people permission to renegotiate a commitment in good faith.
So following from yours, Simon, you can only do that if they agree to commit 100% to the initial agreement for a set amount of time or repetition, whatever that may be. Don't allow them to agree to go, well, if you don't commit long enough for the agreed time, you haven't earned the right to review. So make sure there's a level of disciplined commitment in the agreement, and make sure there's clarity within that.
Stay connected, or keep them connected to the purpose and the value and the reason behind these commitments. What's the bigger picture perspective, and what is the lighthouse, as Mark would say, that we're moving towards? Just a reminder of that consistently.
I think it's about giving people an understanding of what might happen if they don't make this change. So start with a question: what might happen if you don't commit to this change? If you don't follow through on this actions, what might happen? Because the person may be tuning out. They may be unwilling to engage, that their brain is protecting them from thinking through that negative consequences. And if we uncover their understanding of the negative consequences, we can compare it to our own understanding of those negative consequences and then use that as a basis for a conversation. So what would happen if you didn't follow through on these actions?
Once we have that agreement in place, do not leave that room until we clarify the understanding of what could prevent you. What are the barriers, not through your own doing? What are the barriers that could reduce the time frame or prevent you from being successful in this agreement? Once you set them up, that's you understanding them. Set up strategies for what if these happens. So we're being proactive on that communication. We're letting each other know early, not letting it happen, then we're reactive.
There may be a time when you involve others in the process. If it's a young person, you may communicate with their parents to check in and see how they're getting on with this commitment at home. You may check in with their parents as to why they're not following through with this commitment. Maybe there's a source of information there that you just don't have. If it's an adult, maybe you're involving one of their trusted teammates to support them with this commitment. So at some point in time, making the decision, is it of value to bring others into this process?
Final one from me. When you go into the first conversation with that individual who's not honoring the agreement or hasn't followed through on the actions, check your state before you go in, because it can be really frustrating. It can be really frustrating when somebody doesn't follow through, and that can affect my mood, can affect my state as I go into that conversation. And there could be legit reasons. It could be reasons I don't understand yet. And if I go in without that awareness of my own state, then I risk inappropriate language in that conversation, or I risk overstating the situation. Okay, guys, have you got? Oh, I was just going to say, Mark,
you said last one. I didn't say last one, so it's my last one for coach.
Just going to offer you a last one, but you beat me to it.
Yes. Once you're in that position, prime success. So once the agreement's made, make sure you, if you're the one scanning, or peers, or that player itself, or everybody, has a way to consciously remind yourselves of this is what I committed to every opportunity that time comes, whether that's before a practice, before a meeting, in that work area you're doing, help people be successful. If you don't use it, lose it. If you keep it up in a corner, what am I going to scan for? What I'm going to look for a session, before a meeting, it allows people to be successful. Don't wait for it not to work and then you put the intervention in. What can you do to keep it alive, to reduce people not committing to it?
Okay, thanks, Mark. Thanks, Alan. And that's episode 26 in the books. We covered preventing and overcoming individual resistance to change or action. We've got some rapid fire tips there we've offered coaches. We've tried to keep this short, so if you're listening out on your dog walk or your commute, we hope this is fit into your bus journey perfectly. Thanks as always for listening. You can find us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, your usual channels. Please like and subscribe. This week we covered topics that were introduced to Mark through his clients, through individual feedback. So if you know us and you want to reach out with a text or a message, hey, could you guys cover this? Or if you don't know us and you want to comment on YouTube or find us on LinkedIn and connect and send us a DM or whatever channel you choose, feel free to get in touch. Every week we hear from coaches, and that's like the highlight of getting this kind of feedback. So please get in touch, and we'll see you again next week. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.